It's John Bowden from Rock History Music, and we're up to, I think, our 6th or 7th interview with Elton John guitarist Caleb Quaye. As you'll hear in just a second, he was part of the beginning of the Elton John era, even before Elton John was Elton John, when he was called Reginald Kenneth Dwight, and came back for some monumental albums in the mid-70s. In some ways, he knows Elton better than most people. This interview clip will feature our brand new one, which we just did about a month ago. And we'll go back to some older interviews, some bonus material featuring Caleb talking about Elton and Elton songs. We asked Caleb Quaye, who is Elton John, on Rock History Music. Caleb Quaye, the guitarist behind some big legends. If you've listened to the biggest names in rock, chances are you've heard the unmistakable touch of Caleb Quaye. He wasn't the frontman. He wasn't the chart-topping star, but his fingerprints are all over some of the most legendary records of the 60s and 70s. From Elton John to Pete Townsend, Hall & Oates, Quaye wasn't just in the room, he was shaping the sound of an era. During a 1980s appearance on the David Letterman show, Letterman complimented Eric Clapton as the best guitarist in the world, to which Clapton famously replied, "No, a guy named Caleb Quaye is the best guitarist in the world." Quaye met Clapton in 1967 when his band Bluesology was opening for Cream, featuring Eric Clapton, of course. That's when the first big compliment came, when Clapton told Quaye, "I like the way you play guitar." Pete Townsend of The Who once told him, "I wish I could play like you." Another notable part of his history, in 1967, Quaye was a studio engineer at Dick James Music and played guitar on demos with Paul McCartney. Quaye was born October 9, 1948 in England. One of his first big bands was Long John Baldry's backup group, Bluesology, which also featured a little-known keyboard player named Reginald Kenneth Dwight, who would go on to become Elton John. Caleb was an integral part of the early Elton John recordings, like the debut Empty Sky in '69, the self-titled album the following year, Tumbleweed Connection in 1970, and then Madman Across the Water in '71. Caleb would come back to be featured in a harder-edged Elton John band in '75 with Rock of the Westies and the double album Blue Moves. Quaye had solo records and was a member of a legendary band that didn't get their due, Hookfoot, which also featured another Elton John band member, Roger Pope. In 1977, Pope, along with Quaye and another Elton John former band member, Kenny Passarelli, joined Daryl Hall and John Oates' band. They were featured on the live album, Live Time, and the 1978 studio album, Along the Red Ledge, which also featured Robert Fripp on guitar. Daryl Hall was so impressed, he also recruited Quaye for his solo album, Sacred Songs, which was recorded in '77 but released in 1980. Throughout the years, you can hear Caleb on a lot of different records, from the Beach Boys, former Kiss drummer Peter Criss, Joan Baez, Lou Reed, Harry Nilsson, Dusty Springfield, and even Liza Minnelli. For decades, Caleb Quaye has been a secret weapon behind some of rock's biggest names. He may not be a household name himself, but his playing helped define the sound of an era. Whether it was the intricate guitar lines on Madman Across the Water or the soulful grooves of Hall & Oates, he was the guitarist for the stars, without ever needing to be one himself. To you, Elton John is
an important friend in my life. No question about it. You know,
he was a year older than you, right?
Yeah, yeah. So important friend. I mean, we had, and I'm most probably one of the few guys that knew him before he was anything. When he was Reg. There's not many people in the business now that know or that knew him from back then, So I knew his parents, I'd stay at his place, he'd stay at my place, Those years were wonderful, were just, I'll never forget them, because it was like we both, in fact, my mother told me, she said, we were both teenagers who dreamed together. She got it right, we both had the same musical interests, and we couldn't, once I got him signed to Dick James Music, we couldn't wait to get in the studio to do our demos and just start working on this music, with Bernie's lyrics, So it was a very exciting time, and he'd call me up and say, "Yeah, Bernie just sent me some lyrics. I got 3 songs, when can we get in the studio? Okay, let me find out. Let me book some studio time. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, we're in there Thursday. All right, I'll see you there. Boom, boom.
And you'd sneak him in the studio at night as well, right?
Oh, yeah, there was yeah, absolutely. That was before we got him signed, yeah. Yeah. Because I loved what he was doing. And so we were both, we were dreaming and we were learning our craft at the same time. So for me, being in the studio, just, I'm learning more and more about engineering and production and learning to apply my guitar parts to stuff. So just the whole thing,
When you reconnected with Elton that winter, what was the vibe like? Because, I mean, obviously, I'm going to overstate the obvious. Everyone was surprised by Dee and Nigel leaving, and I know you were even.
Yeah.
But what was the vibe when that first meeting, when you got back together?
Oh, you mean in '75 when he changed the band?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, it was great. I mean, he called me up, and I was living in Chicago at the time, and he flew me out to meet with him in Scottsdale, Arizona. There was a tennis ranch out there that he used to vacation at, So I think maybe he was having a break out there with Billie Jean King and stuff like that. So he flew me out there so we could talk about it, and it was great. I totally understood what he wanted, and I just had one stipulation. I said, "Okay, I'll do it." I said, "So long as we don't play Crocodile Rock."
But he did the last night, right? He did the last night.
The last night, he gave everybody the finger with it. Yeah, yeah. But he agreed. He said, "Okay, great." He wanted to be in it. Yeah.
What happened with the first album? Stuart and I talked about that as well. I don't know what he seemed surprised that I knew about it. The album that before Empty Sky that you worked with Elton, did any of those songs are they any of the extra songs on Empty Sky? What happened to those songs?
Elton he released them. They were released. I believe it was last year.
So that was it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I forget. I think he called it. I'm not sure if it's called Diamonds or something like that. But he released all those songs. So there was one called Regimental Sergeant Zippo. It's on there. So yeah, that whole project finally, after 50 plus years.
Did you listen to it? Do you listen to that old stuff?
I did. Yeah, I did listen to it, and it was interesting. I mean, it was a combination, at least in my estimation, a combination of technically sounding archaic because it was just 4-track recordings, and but at the same time you could hear all this creativity going on. We were just trying to do something different, and and of course at the time we were still teenagers, learning our craft at the same time and just going for it, So it brought back a lot of great memories.
Why isn't Elton in the movie?
We asked him, and he didn't want to have anything to do with it. We asked him to give us a, like a 30-second soundbite promo thing for it. Didn't want to do it.
Why?
So,
I mean, how would you know, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Him and his partner, they live in a different orbit.
Yeah.
And that's really all I can say. I mean, so it's an interesting situation because I think, and I know he's supposed to be having another documentary coming out through Disney after this tour finishes. I have no idea what that's going to be like. But I know that I'm pretty sure people are going to ask him questions. What do you What do you think? What did you think of Caleb's documentary? And I don't know what his response is going to be. I hope it will be favorable, but I just don't know.
It's interesting. Let me interrupt you because I think it's important. People, I ask everyone, what would have happened if Elton wouldn't have met Bernie? And there's all these, you hear the stories. Yeah. Oh, Stuart said you'd have a single man, that album.
Yeah.
But everyone has their different versions of that. It's not usually good, but
Sure.
what if, and you touch on it in the documentary,
Yeah.
what if Caleb hadn't snuck them into the studio?
All right. Yeah, I know. Yeah. And Stephen James mentions it in the documentary that, me sneaking him into studio, that was a catalyst for his career. Plus, also, I helped him change his name. So you would have had John Elton if he'd have had his way.
Oh, really? Yeah, Long John Baldry, Elton Dean. Yeah.
Right. So it's just.
So he wanted. Sorry, I have to interrupt you again. I'm sorry.
Sure. Yeah.
So he wanted. It would have been John Elton.
Yep.
And what'd you say?
I said no. I think Elton John sounds better. And the rest, as they say, is history. See, this was when we were in a time crunch because I produced his first single, and the single was due out in 2 weeks. It was ready to go to press in 2 weeks, and so we needed to change the name, and so we had 2 weeks to come up with a name. So that's when all that scramble was going on.
So you guys didn't leave on bad terms, though, right? I mean,
no,
you're very diplomatic when you talk about Elton. It's like,
sure, yeah, oh yeah, no, we never had a fight or anything like that. No.
Okay. Well,
I think basically, I think it's because we took two different paths in life. I became a Christian. I read the Bible. That's where I'm at, and he went into, his lifestyle. And he knows it's not compatible with what I believe.
Yeah. So when you were sneaking them in, you must have believed, or did you, what was your impetus to because you were risking your job?
Sure. Yeah. And I didn't even think about risking my job. I just believed in what we were doing. Here's a little thing, and I know there's a picture in the documentary. It was a photo. I don't think I talked about it, but originally it was good. The project was going to be the three of us, Elton or Reg, Bernie, and myself. And there is a publicity shot that was taken in 1967 with three of us.
A band.
Yeah, just like spearheading a project to kind of, I was the producer, the guitar player. I was also co-writing some things with him, and of course, Elton or Reg and Bernie, they were the main songwriters, But that was originally the thing. So I was all in, I knew that we were doing something different, and the other thing was, it was just a great opportunity for me I was learning my craft as a musician, as a producer, as an engineer. I was engineering the stuff as well. And so for me, I was like, I'm like a kid in a candy store here. This is a lot of fun. We couldn't wait to get in the studio.
On the debut album, well, it wasn't the debut album, Empty Sky, the second project. I mean, obviously there was money there. What was that? How was that different from, what was the atmosphere as opposed to the one that you did with Elton before that resurfaced last year? What was with Steve Brown?
Oh, it was a lot of fun. It was great atmosphere. Steve Brown actually produced it. I just played guitar on it. Because at that time, Hookfoot had formed at that time. So my energies were focused on developing Hookfoot, but we were still, Hookfoot was signed to Dick James, so we were like stablemates, as they call it. But Steve Brown had taken over the production of things, and Steve was really instrumental in encouraging Reg and Bernie at that time to write what they felt rather than try and copy anybody else. See, there was a bit of a battle going on, an ideological battle going on between Dick James himself and us, Reg and Bernie and us. Dick was old school. He was from my father's generation, and the buzzword for him was commercial. It's got to be commercial. It's got to be commercial. And so he's telling, can't you write something like Tom Jones or Engelbert Humperdinck or something? Or we're just like scratching our heads going, give me a break, And so Steve came along and he really encouraged, all of us actually to just write what we felt, which is what we did. So Empty Sky was like the first foray into this new kind of a thing, And so it was fun. It was just great, Dick James gave him the green light to go ahead with it, and so we did,
Yeah.
By the way, what about the movie? Did you see the movie? Rocketman?
Yes, I did.
You don't have to go there. I mean, I asked Ray, when I talked to Ray, and he said, first of all, I never put my feet up. I would never do that.
Yeah, I mean, there was so much stuff in there that was just so far removed from reality. I went there with my wife, because I knew I was going to have to see it because people keep asking me about, so I knew I was going to be a sitting duck for a question. So I said, okay, we need to go see this because I'm going to have to answer questions, And I'm just nudging her through the movie. I'm going, that didn't happen. That wasn't right.
I didn't float on top of the audience. Well, I know you weren't at the Troubadour, but I mean, at that time at least. And I remember thinking, it's strange. When I saw that, I kind of got sentimental because of the fact that, I mean, I've been listening to you for so many years in the band and Elton, and it was a nice moment, but I know that was pure. I mean, no one floats on, that doesn't happen, right?
Yeah. And so there was a lot of, I mean, historical inaccuracies. And of course, I never could understand the whole fantasy aspect of it. Why did he not? I mean, because goodness me, he could have easily done, I think, a much better job if he'd have made it, a biopic and historical, as opposed to the whole fantasy thing. There were times when I thought, well, am I watching West Side Story here, or what is this? And there were a lot of people. There were people, very significant people, that were left out, that were not even mentioned. I'll give you two: Gus Dudgeon and Paul Buckmaster.
Yeah.
I mean, without those guys, it's
well, Nigel and Dee and Davey weren't mentioned.
Yeah, I know. So there's this whole narcissistic thing there that I just don't buy into, because there's a team of people that were behind his career.
My biggest problem with the movie, in spite of I mean, I really did enjoy it, but my biggest problem was Elton. It should have been like Bohemian Rhapsody. I wanted to hear Elton sing.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So, by the way, I was listening to Empty Sky, and I was really getting into Empty Sky this morning, and I hadn't heard it in its entirety in a long time. The thing about, I mean, your guitar work on that is amazing. You keep I mean, there's a lot of styles on that album, and you were like, I think 19 or 20 when you recorded that album. I think 18. Yeah. And no, you were 20 in '68. Yeah. So, what was your? And I mean, I know the Hookfoot thing, and I know the fact that you guys were known as serious players. A lot of our audience loved that when you were saying, we might not have been well known like the Who, but the cats knew who we were.
Exactly, yeah.
And that says an awful lot, because in the end of the day, you can be a Britney Spears, nothing against her, but musicians want to be known as a guy who can really play and can be put in a situation, put him there, put Caleb there, and you'll know what to do. At that point, were you and Elton, because you were in Bluesology together, were you and Elton, did you have a nice rhythm? Because I'm listening to your guitar parts and I'm going, it's like he's played it forever on Empty Sky. It's like,
thank you. Yeah, we were tight musically. We were tight. There was a lot. We had great musical chemistry. Myself, Roger Pope, Elton. We had great musical chemistry.
Yeah.
And I think, the reason for that, I think we listened to a lot, and we absorbed the same musical influences and diverse influences. We weren't just listening to rock and roll or pop music. We were listening to jazz, classical music. So all of it. I came from a professional. My dad was a professional jazz musician. So I was just born into music. It was the soundtrack of it was the wallpaper of our house. When I was growing up. So as a musician, on the artistic side of things, there's this journey. You're on this lifelong journey of assimilating influences that become your own musical language, and then the creativity is to be able to employ these influences in any given situation.
Yeah, like on Empty Sky, I'm listening to you go, dang, I'm going,
yeah.
I love that. Because people forget sometimes that they look at Elton John or any artist and they'll pigeonhole him. And then I'm listening to this and I forgot about that when you go.
Yeah. We never wanted to be pigeonholed. I never wanted to be pigeonholed.
Yeah.
You know? I think the biggest frustration as a musician is to try and describe what you're doing.
Yeah.
People say, what is that? What is music? You know, it's like a good meal, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, you know.
Remember, make sure you comment on our videos, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos. We'd appreciate that. Like them. Makes a big difference on the algorithm. Share them with your friends. Share them on groups on Facebook. And remember, you can join our Patreon. You'll get early access to all our interviews. For instance, this one with Caleb has been on our Patreon over a month. So all our Patreon people have had a chance to see this interview before anybody else. If you want to make a donation, there is a PayPal link in the description. All things Rocky Stream Music are in the description. I'm John Bowden. Take care of yourself.